every time he would message me about it, I'd be like, all right, cool, I'm gonna do it tonight. And then just something would make me forget. And it was
Sure.
like a month that went by. He's like, I fucking need this right now. So when I look at that video, I'm like, wow, I blew it.
Please join me for the first time to hear how it sounds. And 1, 2, 3, 4.
You'll probably hear some weird like chewing noises while they're playing with these toys, but I feel like that's better than them barking, which they also might do, but I'm going to do my best for you.
So safe to assume that the weird chewing noise is not you, or
yes, correct.
It's no defect or anything.
Yeah, it's not just weird ASMR.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, without further ado, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. This is another episode of the Scoped Exposure podcast. I am very excited to be welcoming a man with two first names, but bringing some hard-ass riffs, Tom Smith from the Acacia Strain. Thanks for coming on the show.
Smith a first name?
I guess so. Yeah. I don't know.
It's all good. I'm into it. I'll be two first names. That's cool. I just never thought of that.
Yeah. Maybe I have I was thinking too much about, the new Matrix movie that's out, and then, Smith and all of that. So yeah. Shout out to anyone whose first name is Smith out there.
There we go.
I'm thinking of you.
Smiths. If there's a Smith Thomas out there, I want to hang out with you.
Oh, yeah, a little reversal.
Oh yeah,
I love that. But yeah, Tom, as far as like the why of reaching out to you and having you on the show, I think that I've been following like TW Smith Guitars for a long time, and have really I love to see the progression of that and how hard you rep them, and just like bringing that to the forefront. Plus, the Acacia Strain had a very sick tour that kind of I don't know if wrapped up is the right word, but ended, almost
like premature exit.
Premature exit. That's probably the best way to say it. But yeah, you guys had a really sick tour. I really like the double, playing multiple releases in its entirety, and I think that's something that I kind of wanted to hit on for this episode.
For sure.
But yeah, just someone that I have seen really passionate about gear and riffs and just heavy music, and I'm really happy to have you on the show today.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. Those are definitely the things that I like the most, is riffs and gear and playing guitar.
Absolutely. But before we get into any of the actual music chats, it's standard here to check a bev before the show gets going. So it's also tradition for the guests to go first. So tell me what you're going to be bringing on bev-wise for the show.
So I've got a lineup. Hang on. Am I allowed to cuss? Because I've already done that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
This is not a Disney Channel-esque show. You're all
for
good.
Sure. All right. Well, I have a lineup, kind of not on purpose. I've got Sycamore Mountain Candy. It's an IPA from Charlotte, North Carolina. I've got a Liquid Death seltzer, because Liquid Death is awesome and they treat us well. And then I have this 4-hour-old ice cold coffee that I forgot when I came upstairs to play guitar. So old coffee, also cool.
Yeah. The perfect blend. You got the water, the coffee, and the beer. Like everything in balance. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Big fan of Liquid Death, if the mountain behind me wasn't obvious enough.
Shit. I did not. I saw oh my God, those are over on your left too?
These are all and then the closet over here is filled to the brim. So
Jesus. All right. I'm into it.
If I can tell you a small Liquid Death story before we get into
absolutely
Acacia Strain stuff. So
I'm gonna in honor of it crack the Liquid Death right now.
Fair. You know what, to match you, I'll also just do one, because I could just grab the pile. But what's funny is any person who's been around and listened to multiple podcasts, I actually had Styx, who's Liquid Death's VP of Lifestyle and Marketing, on the show kind of earlier in season 2. So, got to chat about the brand and what they're doing and all those kind of great things. And then him and I have just like stayed in contact. I've had him on my works podcast. And then there's just all these times where he'll send me just an obtuse amount of Liquid Death. And then
That's awesome.
send me recently, he was like, I have all these skids in Canada that I need to get rid of because like we couldn't put it on the market. There was something wrong with like, the can itself. And I was like, hey, my band's playing 2 shows in Toronto. If you want to send one to Toronto, and then you can always send any amount to me here in Alberta. And then just the stories of sending an entire skid's worth of Liquid Death to my parents' house and then taking that to a DIY show and people walking around to their cars with 3 to 4 cases each.
That's
and
amazing.
Then just me hand bombing what might have been 140 cases in like minus 35 degrees Celsius weather. So I actually had a lot of there were some cases where the cans had exploded because they had
I was about to ask about that. Yeah.
So yeah, unfortunately my wife had to come home one day and I had like just cardboard everywhere and just all these single cans. So but a wise person once said, if you want things you've never had, you need to do things that you've never done. Hence, getting an entire skid's worth of Liquid Death so I can have that on my own forever.
You did it right.
Yeah. What's the Liquid Death Acacia strain connection that you were kind of alluding to?
We were on tour, this last tour with Dying Wish, and they just had them constantly. And there was like it was as if their whole trailer was filled with Liquid Death. So they offered us some. We're like, how the hell did you guys get all this? And I think Andrew, their bass player, just was like, here you go. Here's his contact. Hit him up. And if you tell them that you like them, maybe they'll give you stuff. And they did. Yeah.
Yeah. It's it's a great brand with great people working behind it. And any chance that I get to, I'm trying to, slowly work my way towards like convincing them to give me like the official sponsorship. Because for me, I could care less about any amount of like dollar amount being sponsored for this podcast. Just give me some free drinks just so I can drink.
Right. Yeah. You'll make up the money in the amount that you
Absolutely.
want to buy.
Absolutely. But yeah, I love that, for the first, 7 minutes in where we've just talked about Liquid Death. So clearly their branding and marketing strategy works. As far as bevs, what I'm checking, actual bev sponsorships that I have here on the show is a brewery here in Calgary called New Level. So I'm drinking their Pinball Wizard. So it's like a raspberry sour.
Hell yeah.
It's one of my go-tos from them just because I like to have that like, citrusy kind of sour and, Pinball Wizard. Nice. Just
name.
Hell of a name. That's right. Well, I'm going to crack this and then double cheers you with,
hell yeah,
with both of yours. I think this is the first time that I've double cheers someone, so I hope you feel very special for this.
I'm very into it. I love a double cheers.
Love that.
I'm one of those people who's always got like 1,000 different drinks that I'm drinking at the same time, so this is very standard fare.
Yes. Yeah. It's like, it was always, sometimes I always forget. I just assume that everyone's into beverage culture, and then someone's like, "Oh, if I would have known, I would have gone out and gotten this thing."
Yeah.
And some people are like, "Literally, I have 7 on my desk, so I just need to pick one, and then we're good to go." So, but Tom, usually any new guests as far as this show is concerned, I always like to get just a little bit of context about how everyone who comes on the show also gets into heavy music, and I know that you've done a number of podcasts, so however deep or Cole's notes you want to make it as far as like the original the planting of seed moments of the first time you heard guitar music or breakdowns, just kind of break that down for me and we can kind of ease into the episode that way.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's super hard for me to remember like the first guitar music I ever heard because I was lucky enough to have had parents that loved metal. Like they're pretty young. Like I'm 29 and they're, I think 52, 53. So like their teenage years was like late 70s or 80s, I think was their like prime teenage years. So all the like thrash, glam, speed metal stuff was like what they grew up on. So then I just kind of like started there. But yeah, I kind of don't know a life without having like metal of some form in it, really. So that's like the simplest way to put where like my journey into metal and just aggressive music kind of begins.
Got you. Yeah, and I have heard that from like a number of different people that are very aware how fortunate they are to have a generation above them who is already introducing them to that. I guess I'm always like kind of curious if like those parents are like, oh, my kid's gonna turn out to be being in bands and doing these things, even if like they might have liked Metallica, but maybe they weren't playing in a band like Metallica. So, do you know if like you getting into playing in bands and doing all the stuff that you're doing, was that like surprising to your parents still, even though they understood the music itself?
I think maybe a little bit, and I mean it's hard for me to tell because I started playing guitar when I was 8, so that's kind of like I feel like that's when you really like age 6 to like 9. That's when you're kind of like being a real human and not just like this thing that's scurrying around everywhere.
Right.
But I think my parents maybe were a little surprised because I was like a huge baseball kid growing up, like my life was baseball, and I still am a huge baseball fan, but like playing baseball was all I cared about until like honestly until probably like age 11. That's when I was like, wait, I'm not that great at baseball. I'm good at guitar for only playing for 3 years,
Sure.
And then the older I got, like when I got into high school, I was like, okay, I'm definitely bad at baseball. Guitar is the way. But I don't know if they were shocked. I feel like once I picked it up and they saw how like immediately obsessed with it I was. Like I was that kid who kind of like made my own practice regimen at age like 10. Like I was like,
oh wow, you were like self-disciplined that way.
Yeah, I mean, my parents definitely were like, if you're gonna do this, like you got to work on it, like practice every day kind of thing. But I was like, all right, I've got to practice for at least an hour every day. And then once I hit like middle school, it was like 2 to 3 hours a day that I was like, I'm playing guitar. Like I would not go out with friends until after I'd practiced, and all my friends growing up knew that I wasn't coming out. If they heard, like a bunch of my friends lived on my block, so if they heard guitar coming from the house, they were like, yeah, he's not ready.
Yeah, come back in an hour, do another loop on the bikes or whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, that's all like a big ramble, for which I do a lot. I'm a rambler. But yeah, I don't know how much they expected it. I think once they saw me in high school, they were like, okay, yeah, we don't really have an option for him to do anything else at this point.
Right. Yeah, and I do think that there's different, being the first in your generational line, if you want to call it that, when it comes to an interest or a career path or things like that. Like my entire, like my dad and my grandpa, and I would put money on like my great grandpa, but they were all in like the field of, they all work in like the trucking industry and, not driving the trucks, but just working in the operations and sales and all that kind of stuff. And, for me, like, even though I spent maybe a little bit of time when I was like first starting my career, it was still in marketing and like video production, because that's what I was obsessed with. And then like kind of the complement between doing different things in the content world, but also with music, it's like, it's kind of like your parents like, oh, okay. But like it takes some time for you to actually like make something of that. And then they're like, oh, okay. And then it can go even a step further if you get it to a scale where you can actually monetize and make money. And they're like, oh, this is not just like for shits and gigs. It's like,
it's not just your hobby that you spend too much time on.
Right. Yeah. And then I think it's only going to get crazier as our world with the internet and all these different things that are happening, where, it's not ridiculous for someone to be growing up and being like, I want to be a YouTuber. I want to be a Twitch gamer or things like that, because there is a roadmap for people to do those things.
Yeah, definitely. It's weird too. We have my fiance's niece, who is basically my niece at this point. She like, it's just weird to hang out with like a 13-year-old and hear about like how much at the front YouTube and like Twitch is. Like I'm only 29, but that all still feels so weird to me. But you're right, like things have opened up to the point where it's like, yeah, you could do that and that could be a living for you. So I totally get that feeling.
Yeah, I think it it teeters on the difficulty where it's like, yeah, you are seeing people that are like building up these huge personal brands and things like that, but like no one is unfortunately teaching these kids that like nothing is guaranteed when it comes to like when you do something. So if like, your niece is like wanting to do like a makeup thing or like something like that, there's no guarantee that she will be successful at that, but it is that kind of thing where it's like, yeah. So I think like there's new ways of parenting and different things of teaching people. And I guess I'm just hitting on this because I think I apply that to music and bands. Like someone could put out a sick demo, but it's like you're not guaranteed because you have a little bit of buzz in your hometown to go play X Fest or things like that.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think like maybe to go off on like a different direction than what you're saying, but I think that aspect like makes it way harder. Like I constantly am battling in my head of like, is it easier now to like be successful in music or any kind of like content, or is it way harder? Like you've got a million more ways to do it, but then there's also equally like, I mean, probably even there's way more people now trying to do it than ways to do it. So it's like,
right,
where the hell does that come in?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing, and I'll follow you on this tangent and try and tie it to some things with the Acacia strain, because like that band has definitely has a lifespan that has maybe been at a time where it's like there wasn't a surplus of really heavy metalcore adjacent whatever kind of subgenres you want to play in. And now that band is still going on and bringing out the up and comers like Orthodox, Kublai Khan, Dying Wish, like on the latest tour. But yeah, if to toss the question back to you, like, do you think it is harder or easier with things like the internet and streaming and playlisting and reaction channels? There's so many multi layers of this hardcore heavy music onion. But I'm curious if you think it's easier or harder.
I think it's easier to get a small level of recognition and way harder to get a lot of it now. Like when I think of like I said before, like I'm still into a lot of like 80s bands. So like I listen to, I don't know, like I'll be listening to Rat or Motley Crue one day and just be like, damn, like they just were good and they got big and they took over the world. Like nowadays it's like you could get a band where everyone's talking about you, but then they're like one of 5 on a bill for a couple of years and they hit a peak and then the fad leaves and it's like a new band is taking their spot super quick. So I think it's easier to get recognition, harder to like make something of it kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're kind of day trading attention at the end of the day, because so many bands can have like again, like a very sick demo, and just like knowing like most people that are starting hardcore bands or metalcore bands or metal bands or what a DIY band, like they're not taught how to like juice something and like make it have longevity. They're just like, oh my gosh, like someone shared it and I don't know. Like I've been in those positions myself too. So, maybe in your experience, like what is maybe what are your thoughts as far as like trying to not maintain the hype? Because I feel like there's some dangerous, roads there as far as trying to be like a hype band. But I think Tsunami is a great example of that, where they kind of had explosive moments, but they haven't been like, we're going to tour all over the world now. It's like, slowly opening the faucet versus just trying to open the floodgates.
For sure. I feel like I like the Tsunami example, but I feel like more towards what I would say for kind of like keeping hype, like you mentioned. I would rephrase it and not be as much as keeping hype as trying to just simply stay good and keep your head on your shoulders about it. Because I think the problem with like my personal opinion, especially regarding like bands that are only hype, is it feels like they're trying to just do what they need to be doing for it. And then they like hit a point where they're comfortable and everything's all good for them. and then like they stop caring, or things just kind of move in a different direction. But for me, I feel like the most important thing to like keeping your name relative and or relevant and keeping growing yourself is like, one, keep a really good ear to the ground, like understand why people like certain bands or why this band is getting bigger than XYZ band, and see how you could kind of learn from that and apply it to yourself. And then just give a shit. Like, I feel like so many people don't give a shit at what's supposed to be their career, and then they either just fizzle out or they just fail, which is possible for anybody. But I think just learning why the industry is the way it is, or learning why bands ebb and flow, is like the most important thing that you could do as just like a quote unquote worker in this field.
I really like what you were saying just about like people giving a shit and about being good. And I think that's a really crucial thing, because I think that there's a lot of people that, you know, I don't think anyone's out in the heavy music space trying to write bad music or anything like that, but like, you know, writing, like making good art and then knowing how to carry that out and present it well. Because I think a lot of people, maybe the presentation is where people lack, and you know, to give people the benefit of the doubt, I think no one, it's almost like expected that everyone who makes art knows how to, you know, market it well and, you know, think about like how to communicate that to people. But like usually when a band is, you know, on a label and has like people behind them, those are the experts that are like thinking about like, okay, we have this record, and then they plan everything around it. So, yeah, I'm not sure like if you have anything you wanted to add or push back on when it comes to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think that there's like, it's one of those things that's hard to explain because there's so many factors and you want to be good at all of them. But like you said, like sometimes people only know how to do one thing or the other. Like I personally, if I was the one in charge of how our music got released, it would be a goddamn nightmare, because I'm just like, yeah, I just want to write songs and play guitar. Like, I mean, kind of tying it into the Acacia train, like originally when Vincent pitched the release of Slow Decay, I was like, that's fucking dumb. Like, I hate that. Because I don't listen to singles. Like, I wait until a band puts a record out. So I was like, that's the exact way to get me as a listener to not listen to these songs for 6 months. And then when I saw it roll out, and I knew that I know that I'm not good at like the rollout of things. So I trusted everybody else who liked it. But then I saw it, I was like, oh, that's why this was cool, because it's really different. But yeah, so I think you just kind of are accurate in like, a lot of people don't know how to do all of it, and it's also really fucking hard to do any of it. So everyone's just kind of like doing their best, literally. Well, no matter where it's at, usually they're doing their best. But I don't know, sometimes there's a few that don't do their best and they're just there for the ride, and that's what bums me out.
So yeah, let's use that as a jumping off point to talk about the latest album. You know, bringing up how you were saying as far as like the plan of how to release that, was that brought up originally when the pandemic was first starting, and you're like, oh, we have to kind of position this a little bit different, or that was the plan since the get-go?
That was the plan from the third to last day at the studio recording it, and even the tour that we were on, like that had to get cut short with Rotting Out. We had already put out two songs, or maybe even 4 songs at that point. But yeah, it was like we didn't think anything of the pandemic at that point. It just like, I guess this works out for us to keep ourselves relevant during this time. But yeah, there was no plan for that by any means.
Yeah, and I really liked the, you know, every little single had like something else that kind of went into it, whether that was like a feature here or a little music video. So I really liked, you know, it felt natural, but it did, you know, really make sense with the, you know, I think one of the not the greatest memes of that record, but just the fact that they're like, we really thought they were just gonna spell out death, and then it was just like decay. And oh okay,
that was my favorite thing, just seeing how wrong everybody was with all their guesses. I was like, I was like, what are you? Some of the guesses were outrageous, and I was just like, what the fuck? Like, I get that what we're doing is weird, but come on now.
Right. Well, what was one of the weirdest guesses that you saw when it came to, when the spelling started to begin?
I don't remember a specific one, but somebody guessed a word that was like 10 letters long, and I was like, how much music do you think that we were ready to put out? Like, don't get me wrong, we had a lot of songs left over from Slow Decay, but like, no, it's got to be a short word.
Right. Yeah, we're not going to do 10 singles in a row once a month. Like, we have some decency.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's really, really funny. The quarantine style music video where everyone was at home and kind of doing different things. I just loved the fact that you guys just like really had fun despite the really, because that's right in the middle of, the first summer of this time.
Yeah.
So, when you think about that video, what is like the one shot that always gets you when you rewatch it? Like you can't not laugh when you see it.
More than anything, I think when I see that video, I think about how bad of a job I did because I forgot, honestly. Like I forgot about it. And Vincent, and Vincent was like, he texted me, he's like, I need this footage. Rise is asking for it. You need to do something for this video. I was like, oh fuck. Like every time he would message me about it, I'd be like, all right, cool, I'm gonna do it tonight. And then just something would make me forget. And It was like a month that went by. He's like, I fucking need this right now. So when I look at that video, I'm like, wow, I blew it. But if I have to pick a favorite spot, it's like, I think I air drum with my one dog and then I air guitar on the other dog. And it's just because my dogs are in the video. Like that's the only reason I like those parts.
It's funny that you kind of pull the curtain back a little bit about that because you got you like Vincent with like the Swiffer and he's like ninja spinning it and like all these other things and then you're like, well, and I feel like as dog owners it's like, okay, what can I do? Oh, I have two dogs. That's an easy card to play and just include that. Yeah,
you could the biggest giveaway that I forgot is that I'm in the same shirt in every single shot. Like I was just like I can't even fake this. Like I just have to get something to him. And like,
it wasn't like, okay, this day I'll do this. And then the next day I'll do this. You're like, it was like a sprint at that point.
It was like 1 hour that I was like, I called my fiance. I'm like, Laura, like you have to just hold the phone on me for like 20 minutes and just, I'll play it 3 times and I'll just do stupid shit for other parts. And it was very much like, oh shit moment. I have to get this over to these guys.
Yeah. Upload that to the cloud. Make sure it's in their hands. I think, just correct me if I'm wrong. The person that edited that, was that Caleb?
I don't know. I think originally Vincent was going to do it. And then I think something happened. Maybe very much possible that because I blew it, that he didn't have time. I don't know for sure, but whoever did, it came out great. I know it wasn't Vincent like it was originally supposed to be.
Yeah, like this is, going way back in time for the podcast. Caleb was a videographer who used to work for an entrepreneur guy named Gary Vaynerchuk, and he's kind of a metalhead, so we kind of connected through that. Had him on I think he's like episode like 12 or something. It's like very, very early days.
Nice.
But then I think I'm pretty sure that I saw that he at least pieced it together. So
yeah, I think
if that's true,
I just don't know. Yeah, I was like, I think honestly during that specific point of the pandemic, I was just like, I'm fucked. I don't care what's happening. So I just like I was not paying a lot of attention to anything on the planet during that like those first like 5 months. I was like, I can't comprehend anything. I'm gonna just sit in my house.
No, that's fair. So kind of fast forwarding, so put out the record in the summer of last year. You guys have gone to do a bit of touring around it, obviously alluding to the Orthodox Dying Wish Gulbicon tour. Just talk to me a little bit about that tour experience and just like, because I think when I was first interviewing people, when things first started popping off, it was always that thing of like, well, we're going to put out this music and then people almost feel pressured to like put out something like not even a year later, just because it's like, oh, the songs will be as fresh. So was that kind of like did you have some closure in being able to play a lot of those songs live on the nights where you were playing those songs?
Oh yeah, I mean that was amazing to finally get to do. I mean, Slow Decay stuff was cool, and I love that record. But for me, that tour was It Comes in Waves. Like that was the. I mean, I put a lot of work into all the like gear and tech side because of we have a totally new setup. And I worked equally hard on everything, obviously, but like night one, It Comes in Waves right into Slow Decay. I was like, this is what I worked for. Cause like pretty much all of the Slow Decay songs that we played, I wrote as well. Like Seeing God, Griffin and I wrote together, but like the other 4 or 5, those were like my songs that we all tweaked together a little bit, but they were my creation starter point. And then some of them didn't change at all. But yeah, that night was probably my favorite night of songs I've ever played in my life.
Yeah. Talking about that tour, because what was really interesting is you guys were doing, It Comes in Waves in its entirety, and then Wormwood in its entirety as well. What goes into like doing like a tour that's specifically tied to the honoring and showcasing of an album in full? Like, I've never been able to ask someone like, when you're doing a 10-year anniversary or 15-year anniversary of a record that means so much to people. Like, how do you approach that differently than like figuring out like, okay, we got to have the mosh song into the fast song and then the slow,
Yeah.
Talk to me about like the differences there.
Well, the biggest difference is that I hate playing an entire record in full.
Sure.
And I think whether people say it or not, I think more people dislike it than they will ever admit. I just don't give a shit. I'll admit that I hate playing a record from start to finish. Because there are songs that are not good live. Like, I don't think a lot of people get that. And the first time I ever experienced that was when I was in high school. I went and saw Slayer and they did all of South of Heaven. And there was a few songs where I was like, I love this song, but this just feels weird live. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. So there were times where like we'd be in the middle of like Wormwood and like the Unabomber. I love listening to that song. It's one, hard to move around and play it. It's too hard to move around at all for it. So like that was the one where everyone's just kind of like standing there staring. There's a couple other moments of that too, but like I think that's the biggest challenge of playing a whole record, is just being like, yeah, this song's probably not going to work out too good. Just know that it's not going to be as fun to play.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, though, It Comes in Waves, start to finish. I think because it's like, I mean, the whole thing wasn't meant to ever play live. Like, we never thought that we were going to play it live. So going into it, we were like, people might hate this live. We like it. Let's just do it and not give a shit. But when it's like a band like us, where it's supposed to be like mosh the whole time, when a song doesn't work live, it's because you can't move around to it. So those are like the biggest, especially between those 2 nights, but just in general, like that's the big difference, I think, between playing like a normal set list where you can cater, like you control what the crowd feels, versus a whole record where like we're at the mercy of the record,
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's totally that thing where it's like a band that is putting songs that like maybe aren't like the hardest hitting or guaranteed mosh moments, if you want to call it that, but it's like, we need this like quote unquote palate cleanser to get you ready for the second half of the set or whatever it is. But it is interesting to like it seems like those tours and those sets are like for the fans versus for the fans and the band, because it's like,
for sure,
you can't do like a record showcase tour show and do it half-assed where you're like, maybe we'll cut out these ones because then it doesn't really showcase the whole record. But yeah, it's very rare for bands who have been doing things as long as you guys have to like, like we're gonna, when we do a new record, we're gonna do certain songs that like make sense when you're sitting down and listening to it, because oh wow, they went here. But like in a live setting, maybe it doesn't work in those cases.
For sure, yeah. And that, like, honestly, these two without trying to get purposely nerdy or anything, but like this tour with the two separate nights was like where we were like, all right, we have to kind of like implement some technology. Like we, up until this tour, like we've never played with like a click track. We've never played with like backing samples. It was literally just like go up there and jam.
Yeah.
And to do It Comes in Waves, and the Slow Decay stuff has like a lot more layered shit. But so much of Wormwood is like what like the riffs repeat a million times, but it's like the weird little ambient leads above it and textures that like make it feel like a new moment. And we're just like, we can't play this without these going. And some of them are just not natural to just play, like one guitar doing that while the other one's doing it. So we were like, all right, we've got to kind of implement all of this shit and make it actually work like a record, you know?
Yeah. So that tour was the first time that you guys had all the more high-end technical like band, like heavy band things, it sounds like.
Yeah, like I mean, we've always had like great gear and shit, but like this was the first time we've ever had a laptop be part of our rig. Like
yeah,
that's never been a thing.
Yeah, that's very interesting because like the band's been going on for so long, but like you see bands that are in their first, second, or even third year, or they start as a band that has like the laptop that, you know, someone presses play and, you know, has the clicks and the samples, and, you know, to each their own, because I think that there is a lot of production value that goes into that. But I think that's something to be said about you guys, that you guys were a band for so long that didn't really rely on the the stuff happening through like a laptop, or at least weren't creating those things in the moment through like a guitar pedal or something like that.
Yeah, and that was probably the biggest part of why we hadn't made that jump yet. This was also the first time we ever had like in-ear monitors too, and that I think we've all wanted for a while, just because like stage monitors are the worst sounding things on the planet when you tune down to F like us. But
yes.
Yeah, I mean, that was like a huge part of us waiting so long to do it, because there's so many bands that I'm never going to name names, but there's so many bands that are relying on that shit and quite literally faking some of the parts, that we were like, we never want to be looked at as that band. And even moving to a click track in general, like I was like, shit, like I don't want to be seen as a band that could be faking it ever. To the point where we were like, I was like, how can I trigger off some of these like synth moments in It Comes in Waves? And our sound guy was going to play third guitar at one point so that we could not do as much shit. And then we were like, all right, fuck it. Let's do it. Cause so many people thought that we were ready on a click. So many people thought that we already did all that stuff. So we're just like, whatever. Like if people think we're ready doing it, we might as well do it and up the value of the show.
Sure.
And we were all really nervous to do it, but I think like after show 3 or 4, we were like, yep, this is the best thing that we ever could have done. And I think we sound like, I know we're playing better than we ever have before, because we could all actually hear each other. But a lot of people who saw this last tour were like, yeah, it was worth it.
Yeah. But I do think that it's there's my dog trying to open the door. But I do think, you know, it's I think certain bands, not like they earn their stripes to kind of getting to that point, but like I think the trajectory of a band like you guys, or even like Knock Loose, if you guys started at that production value, like you almost lose some people. Like I think that there's some respect and some extra kudos to be given when it's like a band at your scale that's playing huge, you know, stadiums and festivals. But it's like, yeah, like we plug in and play, and like we play together, and like, yeah, like there's something to be said where you have, you know, a tailored thing that's like in your ear. But I think like that is such a like a hardcore ethic in a way, where it's like, you know, wanting to like actually play with, you know, your band of brothers, if you want to call it that. So it's interesting that, you know, you guys took the time that you did, and you're like, okay, this is actually super sick, and we're gonna keep doing
for
that
sure. But it's funny you say that though, because there was one moment like after we had already, hey, they broke in. There was one moment like after we had already ordered everything for the rig, bought it all, and I like texted my buddy John Torn, who he plays in Recon. He used to play in First Blood. Like he's just one of our collective best friends. And I texted him. I was like, yo, this is all my idea mostly. Am I fucking ruining like the image of this band as like a good raw band? And he wrote back and he's just like, honestly, I don't know if I've ever viewed the band as a raw band. Like, I think it makes
Right.
sense that you guys are doing this. Like, you're sludgy and heavy, but you've always had like somewhat technical parts. So
Mm-hmm.
once he said that, I was like, all right, well, people don't seem to give a shit as much as I do. So yeah, I
Right.
didn't really care. But I know what you're saying. Like anytime I see a band that's like been around for 6 months and they've got an in-ear setup and a whole like a laptop rig, I'm like, all right, man, play the show. That's
Yeah.
kind of like, and maybe that's me being jaded and kind of like opinionated and sometimes can be a dick about things like that. But I've, I don't know. I think we've earned that. And not saying you have to be at a certain level to implement that, but yes, all that is a big ramble to agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, I do think that if you're playing in a lane that it makes sense to have, like a click track or like, all that kind of stuff, like just own it. Like
Mhm.
I think a band like Spirit Box, like starting, still, they've been doing kind of, it's kind of like Spirit Box before and after Holy Roller, because that was kind of like their breakout song. But like that's a band where it's like, yeah, it makes sense for them to have the level of production and some of those things that they do because of, how their music sounds. But if you're
For
kind of
sure.
like like I do agree that, you can kind of sniff out when people are kind of like doing things in like a way where it's like, okay, you're bringing all this like production value, but you're trying to be kind of like a sanction level, like kind of DIY metalcore band, and something's not making sense here.
Yeah. I think Spirit Box is one of the best examples of using all that like right off the bat, but they're also like they've all been in bands their whole lives,
Totally. Yeah.
I'm more or less, I guess, talking about like a band that's maybe even like the regional band on a tour where they have a 20-minute set and the whole show gets delayed half an hour because their in-ear rig isn't working. And I'm like, dude, just play the set, like figure
Right.
it out. Just I'm all about like if something's not working, just do your best and don't delay things. Um,
Right.
and that's not to like I don't want to put down any like younger or like starting band that might want to use technology because I get it. I think it's fucking awesome and I there's a reason I love all this nerdy gear shit, but don't let it like ruin your show because of that. Like because
Or ruin the show for the other bands that you're playing with.
yeah, or that. And because other bands will pick up on that. Like if you set the whole show behind because you're fiddling with things that like you don't really need for this 20-minute set or something, other bands are going to recognize that. If they see like if we were to have a band like that and I saw them have a problem and they went, fuck it, just play, I'd be like, there you go. They get it. Like use
Yes.
technology to the best of your abilities, but if it's not there, do your best and just figure it out.
Yeah, I think whatever level of production you have, you need to be able to still play your set like direct in, no pedals, no bullshit,
100%.
like in the
Yeah.
in the midst. And
Absolutely.
to be said, like my band just played a show in Toronto like at the top of December, and because we flew in, I was like borrowing gear, and I was not sure, like halfway through the set something was off in my chain. I'm trying to figure things out in the midst of playing, and then I just plugged straight in, and even though I wasn't able to properly diagnose it, because you're playing for like 20 minutes or whatever it
For
is.
sure.
So many people came up to me, and you get the 6 set, and I was like, yeah, like aside from the technical stuff, it was whatever. But
Yeah.
so many people had much more respect that I just like kept it rolling versus like okay, we're gonna stop for 15 minutes and figure what the fuck is going on. And when you have like more elaborate setups, like every single thing that you're connecting to is a potential like deterrent of something going wrong.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, you just being like, fuck it and plugging straight in, that's exactly what you should have done. Like
Yeah.
you might not have the best sounds that you're always getting, but the show has to happen.
Right.
So
Yeah. It's like, like it's kind of like the fuck it, we'll do it live kind of meme. Like that's how I just
Literally.
apply it. It's like,
Yeah.
With all that being said, you were kind of mentioning like, we talked about like when you play to when you're doing kind of an album tribute kind of tour, things like that, there's different things, and just writing different types of heavy music. So this is more of like a general question, but I think you as someone who's not only done Acacia Strain stuff, but like, done stuff at the machine shop. I heard that you were also in Structures for a bit, which as a Canadian, I hella think that is sick because that was a huge instrumental, not like band that like influenced me like on a musician wise, but just like so sick to see a band like be that technical.
Yeah.
So all those things being
I only
said,
played with
like,
them for a very little bit, but yeah, that was awesome to play with them.
yeah, I was like ultra surprised at like the end of last year. They were just like, here's an album. I'm like, excuse me?
It was fucking awesome. I had heard like whispers of that happening, and then when I heard it, I was like, oh my God. Yeah, I still love that band.
Yeah. So all that being said, I guess like a very general question, but I think we can break it down a lot is like, in the midst of like, and this goes back to another thing we were talking about is like, there's like the supply and demand of heavy bands is like very in flux right now. So like in all the noise, what like makes like a memorable heavy song versus like, I've heard this version of this type of song from all these different bands?
For sure. Wow, that is a very difficult one to say because I still don't know. So for me, and this is because, I mean, granted, every genre has a million bands that are all somewhat similar, but being in the metal world, like you kind of have to figure out a way to be, you have to figure out a way to be different from everything else going on. Cause like we said before, there's so many bands and attention spans are short. So for me, I like when you can combine like different genres and sounds. Like especially for us with like It Comes in Waves, like I was like, cool, how can I make Neurosis and Mastodon sound like the Acacia Strain as well? And like
right.
Spirit Box, like we were talking about them before, they're a great example of basically putting two polar opposite genres together. Like they're a metal band, but they're also kind of like a pop band, and I don't mean that in any derogatory way. Like I fucking love pop music to the moon, but they're like, if Dua Lipa and Meshuggah were to have a brainchild, like it might very well sound like Spirit Box, So for me, I mean, one, like you want to hear like I feel like you can tell when like someone just is authentic. At least I feel like I can tell. Like I want to hear something that feels genuine, but I also want to hear people try to like input their influences and make something new out of it, Like I don't want to just hear a band that sounds exactly like every other band. And I think most people want something different from every band they listen to,
Totally. Yeah. And I think, I think saying a band has pop influences, like, I think that's great because I would almost argue that, like, that catchiness is the thing to make people remember song names, remember the vibe and all those things. Like, a past podcast guest, Jordan of a band from California called Momentum, like he talked really like extensively about like writing his lyrics more like Parker from The Story So Far would write them, where there's like catchy hooks and different things like that. And like his band doesn't sound like anything like The Story So Far, but take an influence of that to make it more quote unquote poppy, I think that there's a lot of value in that. And I think a lot of people that do heavy bands as their like primary band can get lost in just like, how heavy can we make this versus like you were saying, kind of combining a bunch of things to make a new heavy, a new like, variant, if you want to use that term, of heavy music.
Yeah. I mean, I think it just kind of comes back to like what I was saying before, where like you have to keep your ear to the ground and try to learn about why, like why a certain band is bigger than another and why they're growing X amount of ways. Like I'm all about like, you have to learn things, like it drives me crazy when people refuse to listen to a certain genre of music, or they like just immediately like, oh, I fucking hate XYZ band. It's like, I listen to bands that I don't like sometimes to learn. Like, I think it's just super important to learn what makes something great and what makes something suck. And then that's crucial. I mean, that right there, that's a big part of my answer. Like that's crucial to learning how to write a good song, you know, like, but every song that I personally wrote for Slow Decay is a pop structure. Like I love pop music. The whole pandemic, I was just writing pop music, like instrumentals, and it works. So grab from literally every genre. Like a band like Cannibal Corpse uh and Taylor Swift have nothing alike except maybe their song structures, you know? Like
Sure.
there's no reason to not utilize things that you know work, you know? And I think that's the most important thing about using pop music as a reference is it works. Like the top 20 songs are the top 20 songs globally. Everywhere on the planet it works. So why not implement some of that into this weird little underground world, you know?
Yeah. And I think that there's a a healthy balance of like, like I think it is very apparent where like a band that comes out and it's like, okay, like I see the not only the song structure, but like some of those things that are placed into it to make it like, oh, this is the chorus where the song title said repeatedly. So I like really remember what the song is versus like, I know this song has a cool breakdown, but I have no idea like what the song name is.
For sure.
So yeah, I do think that there's a level of that, but also, like it's it kind of goes back on to what we were talking about earlier. Like you can kind of sniff out when it's like too much in one kind of pushing in one direction. So I think that there's a healthy balance of, practicing a level of self-awareness of, which is more important to you and not trying to be too inauthentic that way.
For sure. Yeah. And I think just to what kind of like have a period on the pop music influence in
please.
Heavy songs, like me personally, I think it works so well because especially a band like us, like we're on 8-string guitars, tuned down to F, screaming vocals, like layers of vocals, fast drums. Something has to keep it all together, you know? Like, don't get me wrong, bands like Between the Buried and Me, they play more notes on a record than I probably have ever played in my life, and it works great for them. But they're they're an anomaly band, you know? Like there will never be another BT Bam. So for something like, at least for my approach, I go, we got a lot of shit going on. How can we keep this digestible and keep it simple-ish? Not that we're like a tech band, but I think it's just important to have like something grounding you. And for me, that was like, all right, I'm going to write the coolest riffs I can in the most simple song structures possible and make them try to connect in a way.
Yeah. Cause I think I was thinking about this when I was like, oh man, this is going to be a big question that I like shoot at Tom and he's probably going to hate me for it.
No.
But I do think it's a healthy exercise to actually like ask that. Cause when I think of like, if you're playing in a 5-piece band, the drums are almost like setting the pace as to which the song is going. And then the strings are like kind of leading the direction of like where it's going. There's a reason that everything cuts out and it's just the guitar playing the next riff of like, oh, left turn, here we go. And then the vocals are kind of like the storytelling and the emotion that kind of like brings it all together. So
For sure.
I do think that it is like really good to think about, if we want to, finalize on like the pop structure of things. I think that there's different, quote unquote pop things that you can do in each of those lengths, whether that's simplifying a guitar riff, simplifying a drum beat to make it a little bit punchier and hit harder. Lyrics, having things coming back around. So yeah, I do think that and I think that's easier said than done to make your band more pop-esque, because I think, it takes a lot of time of like writing something really crazy and being like, okay, like, do we like lean into the craziness and that's our crazy song on the record? Or do we kind of bring it back and try to rework a couple things?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think kind of part of that, maybe this is it. I don't know if this is exactly like where you were planning on going with this or if we were trying to cut this topic, but I think that kind of like the where do I go with this? Like, do I lean into the crazy? Do I rein it back? Just as like a kind of sidebar, but related to that, that's why me personally, like I write a full song as fast as I can. If like I don't go back to songs. Like what you hear is what I wrote in that moment because there's too much thought that could go on into it. Like every single song I wrote for Slow Decay, I think at most was 3 hours of work. Like I was like,
wow, okay.
Granted, I come from a studio background, so like all the tech clicking around programming drums, like that's literally like breathing, like it's second nature to me. But yeah, I'm like, all right, get this idea, get the next idea, move on. Like, because when you start overthinking and trying too many things, like it's definitely important to try new things, and you shouldn't move on from a part until it feels correct. But I think that's like a big thing. Like people spend too much time on songs sometimes. Like I know guys who are like, yeah, I've been working on this song for like 2 weeks. I'm like, dude, like you don't even know what's good and bad anymore at that point, you know? Like I worked on a record with somebody and they were stuck at a part, and literally, like this was when I was working at Machine Shop, Graphic Nature. Literally I went downstairs, worked on something else, and then at the end of the day, 8 hours later, I came up and he was still looping the same 8 bars, like literally for 8 hours trying to think. And I was like, dude, your ears don't even work at this point. Like nothing works. So I love to try new things, but when something feels right, and that's really more of just like an internalized thing, like whatever feels right to everybody is different, but when it feels right, just fucking move on. And then maybe with the whole band come back to it. But I'm like let's write as much as I can right now, feel it right now, and then not think about it. So it's kind of like that to me comes back to like, do I lean in? Do I go? Whatever in that moment, fucking go for it and feel good about that, you know?
No, that I'm really happy that you brought that up, because I have felt that like, not the uncertainty, but just like there have been times where I've written songs like, you know, you get those spurts and it just like naturally just comes out, and it's like, oh, like there we go. And then like once you bring it to the band, you might like tweak a couple things, but the whole skeleton of the band is like, all 10 fingers and every bone in your body for the song is there. And you're maybe just like moving this slightly here and there. And at the same time, there have been times where it's like I write something and I'm like, okay, it's usually just the end part of a song that I'm like, I'm not 100% on this, or I listen back to it. But I do think that you're right. You get into some mind games about like, some of those things. And I think it's probably a healthier exercise to just like write a song, put it in the Dropbox, write another song, and then continue. And then when you're like, okay, it's time to pick 10 songs for an album, if you have 30 songs to pick from, it's just picking what's best, versus like you have 5 really good songs that you worked 2 years on, and then it's like, oh, I have to do that again just to get an album's worth.
Right. Yeah. And like another part of that is just like, be okay with writing something bad. Like sometimes you just write a bad song, but if you're in a band, you should be professional enough to be able to, 1, hear that your song sucks, or 2, be like, I know this is bad, help, but like overall, just, that's kind of like why what you said about like spending 2 years writing 5 songs, like that to me, like that you're just asking for a bad record at that point, like spending that much time on little tiny things that then make you change other things, and like get out with it. If it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. And then if it's bad, figure out why it's bad and then do better. Like I always say, like when I write songs, I write something shitty until it's good, like that's how I always phrase writing songs. And then it just, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And then if not, you do it again. You just keep writing songs.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. And I hope that's encouraging to people that are like maybe mixed up when it comes to like their songwriting process of like, how do I get this like perfect song? It's like, well, you will never know if it's a perfect song until you like put it out, like to do another Spirit Box example, like when I had Bill on from the podcast, like Holy Roller wasn't supposed to be this amazing song. It was like, this is just going to be a whatever song that's coming out on Eternal Blue. But when the pandemic hit, they were like, well, maybe we'll just use this video as like a little single, like a little taste, and then like
It
people
blew
all
up.
around the world were talking about it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like you will never know if it's a perfect song until you've written like 100 songs and like slowly you like put it out, and then the world will tell you like this is a perfect song.
Yeah. Well, that's the last thing I was going to touch on with that is like the only perfect song that exists also is somebody else's song. Like you will nitpick your own shit apart for the rest of your life, but you hear something from another band that you didn't create and you go, this is fucking perfect. You know, like there's things in it, every song that I've written basically where I'm like, oh, I could have added this little thing, but I can't do shit about it now. It felt good then.
Right.
And other people, like same thing with Holy Roller for them, like Chinamasta, that song for us, I was like, this ain't gonna make the record. I wrote this in an hour. Like I hated it. And then it became like everyone's favorite song on the record. I was like, all right, I mean, the song's cool, but I wrote it in an hour, maybe even less. Like it just worked and it was a quick song, you know? So songwriting is fucking crazy, man.
Yeah, but I think, you know, the things that you brought up, like not writing, like being okay with writing music, or like, you know, being okay with like not trying to over perfect or over complicate, and just like I think output is like really the true cycle of being able to continue your growth as a musician. So, you know, not being fearful of like trying to be like having the most pristine resume, like just keep showing up, keep having your at bat, and you know, eventually you'll get into like the rhythm of like, yeah, this is it, this is what I do, and then the world will tell you if you're the bee's knees or not.
Oh yeah, people will definitely let you know in that comment section.
Right. Tom, before you know, it wouldn't be a Tom Smith podcast if we didn't talk about TW Smith guitars.
Yes.
So, you know, when it comes to, you know, those are the axes that you're primarily rocking, especially when you're out on tour. Can you just tell me
own one guitar that's not made? That's not a TWS, and
yeah,
it's my Les Paul.
And for all the video like visual people that are watching this podcast, like there's a ton of guitars behind you, and probably aside from the acoustic and the Les Paul, it's probably all or primarily TWS.
No, it's all TWS. It's the acoustic that was like $400 on Reverb, and then my Les Paul that I only got in a trade with someone buying a TWS.
Oh, okay. So it's all connected to a degree.
Yeah, I wouldn't have that Les Paul if it wasn't for TWS guitars, for sure.
Right. Yeah. So
I can't afford that.
So tell me a little bit about like the brand itself. Like, I think that there's always sometimes when I'm searching up, like whether it's you or the guitars like Instagram page, it's always like I jump to the wrong one at times. So obviously there's a clear connection with the name.
Yeah.
But if you just want to tell, you know, for the people that have no idea about the brand or the guitars, about what that is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for anybody that doesn't know, it's my father that is the builder, and I say the builder because it's literally only him. Like he started out building he doesn't play guitar first off, but he is just like a master craftsman kind of guy. Like growing up, he literally like rebuilt my whole house like with his bare hands by himself.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So like he's just that guy who can build anything. And he like tried it out once because I mean I was a freshman in high school when he started building, but just like I was guitar obsessed my whole life, and it was like my parents are very supportive, so that kind of ties in where like my dad was literally like, well, he wants all these guitars that he can't afford, we can't afford, and there's just no option for that. I like building shit, let me try building a guitar. And then it literally just kind of spiraled from there. Like he started when I was a freshman. He didn't get like really good until way later, as does anybody who's like starting an endeavor. But yeah, It's been, I think, like, holy shit, it's been like 14 years that he's been building now. I guess that makes me feel real old. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I think I was like 14 or 15. So yeah, he's been building for a while now, but in the last like year and a half, things have really taken off to the point where like now he can quit his normal job, which he works like an absurd amount of hours at his normal job at like an energy plant. And on his days off, he's building guitars full time.
Right.
So he just never stops working. But yeah, it's just a one man hand built operation. Like every single thing you're touching, if you have one of those guitars, was put in place, cut, like sanded, shaved down, everything by him. Right. And it's a little preemptive, but this year he's like going full bore with it, where he's like leaving his job, and him and my mom are moving down to North Carolina where I live, and he's going to be full-time building. And if all goes according to plan, I'll be also building with him on a much smaller basis, because
sure.
I can work on guitars, but I cannot fucking build a guitar. But
right.
Yeah, it's just like, I mean, it's basically, it's him. I just kind of help guide and help him with the ship, you know. Like I'll help him with like social media, or just for a long time before he was fully confident, it was like, all right, you're the official guitar tester of everything that goes out. And it wasn't really until like the last couple of years that he's been like, okay, yeah, I don't need you to test things. Like when I first moved to North Carolina, he would like hoard a couple orders, be like, all right, test them all out at once. When you're back up in Jersey, I'm going to ship them all out. But yeah, he's just amazing guitar builder. And I don't use them just because he's my dad. Like I played a lot of guitars over the course of my life, and there's a reason I haven't moved away from them. Like when I joined the Acacia strain, I easily could have gotten an Ibanez deal, and I just did not care. Like I will always play these guitars.
Yeah. It's like, Dad, I love you, but like, I don't know. But like, it's clear that like, you know, it's a properly crafted and like sustainable thing, and probably, you know, shines a lot brighter than a lot of, you know, the Ibanez's, the LTDs, the Jacksons of the world. And I think it's just, you know, the story, you know, clearly there's, you know, a long time, like 14 years doing anything is a long time, but being able to slowly scale that up, and, you know, now him kind of taking the leap and doing that's to me, that's beautiful. And I think that's like, you know, a lot of people don't put in the amount of years of work that it takes to actually live that kind of dream. So that's very exciting. So shout out to him. You know, it was pretty interesting because I think I started to discover and find out about some of that when I was doing marketing and video content for a woodworking company here in Calgary. And so, you know, I was like learning about all these exotic woods at the shop, and then, you know, seeing the same on the Instagram. I was like, oh, you're messing with Babinga? Like, let's go. So how much of that has been like educational that you and your dad have needed to do when it comes to like, you know, these aren't just like, you know, the cheaper woods that, you know, maybe other companies are using. Also, there's like there's different supply demands when it comes to, you know, not being able to ship things to the States as well. So how much of that process has been educational when it comes to like, hey, you're not like, it's almost like you're buying, like you're not buying a Toyota, you're buying like a higher end, you know, vehicle for your music endeavors almost.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's still a learning process, you know, like, but a lot of that learning, especially early on, like pure trial and error, because like, I mean, you know, your staple woods, like, you know, maple, mahogany, and like rosewood, you're going to find that on almost every guitar. When you start diving into the more exotic woods, like Babinga and, like zebra wood and Purple Heart and shit like that, like some of it works great. Like Purple Heart is amazing for guitars, but Bing is great. Zebra wood, not as much. Like you learn a lot, and how he and I both learned that was he would try something new, I'd play it and go, oosh, something's fucked on this thing. Like, or it would go out on a tour with myself or somebody else, and I'd be like, oh, there's a little like tuning stability issue. Like, how can we fix that? I mean, and I'm talking years ago with that. Like, trust me, I beat the fuck out of the guitars that I have now, and I literally never have to tune them. I do because I'm a psycho, but like every time I click my tuner on, they're perfectly in tune, but I'm just neurotic about that. But yeah, it was literally like, I mean, it's all educational. Like I said, like everything, you should always want to learn more about every single thing you're doing, especially if you care about it, like at a personal level like that. But it was trial and error and a lot of bad guitars early on that now you would never think were the same company, honestly.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, it's really great to, like, I think another thing that I want to ask you too is like, because, the Acacia string is like very in front of a lot of, there's people that have been playing guitar for double digits amount of years and people that are just wanting to, they're trying to learn their first song that's an Acacia string song. So there's almost like a huge demographic of like, audience, but really like the guitars that you and in your dad primarily are making are like for more of like the high end like player, like hence being a NAM and all of those things. So like maybe to break down, for someone to just be like, oh, I want to get a guitar, but then they're like, maybe you're not like for someone who's considering like any piece of gear that's like a lot more custom and tailored to them or a specific lane of musicianship, like what do you think that people need to take into account or consider before they're just like annoying your dad or you off of a message about like, I have a Jackson Dinky, like, can I get like, am I ready for this?
For sure. I think, well, first off, like, I think everyone, no matter what level of player they're at, deserves to have an instrument they love. Like our merch guy, and tour manager, he does both. Ollie, he just recently like put down a payment for a guitar. My dad's built one for him, and for a while he was like, I have a studio, but I don't really play much. Like I'm just kind of a hobby guy. I'm like, who the fuck cares? Like and that's not me trying to sell him on it. I don't care who has one. I want people to have them, but I'm not gonna bait my friend into like buying something that's not up his alley. But I was just like, dude, if you love playing guitar, get something that makes you love it more, but just on a better scale of how to ask that, like if you're messaging myself or my dad on the TWS page and you're expecting to pay $1,100, that's not going to be the company for you. They're like hand built, one person, all the highest end like electronics and woods. So just in your head, have it be $2,800 or more. That's like the most basic one. And that's not me trying to be like, oh, you have to pay a lot for these things, but the amount of time that goes into it is worth that. And that's the baseline thing. So it's definitely more for someone who wants a higher end thing, and if you're a hobbyist, fuck yeah, but you have to be expecting to pay high end for a high end product kind of thing. And then, but to also piggyback off that, he does do like payment plans. So I know a lot of people who like they put X amount down for their deposit, and they send him like $200 a month for X amount of months till it's paid off. And once it's paid off, then you get your guitar. So like you're basically financing something if you want to do it that way. But then if you are gonna get a guitar from him, and I'm only saying this because I know a ton of people who have done this, get something that you already like. Like I know guys who they hear a custom made guitar, they're like, I'm gonna do this weird body style with this weird headstock, and it's gonna have a Floyd Rose, and it's an 8-string Floyd Rose, and I'm gonna have 10 different like new pickups I've never used before because I like that Meshuggah uses them. Like if you don't play that and you're gonna spend this much money on a guitar, it's gonna be a wall ornament for you. Like if you've never played a Floyd Rose and you want your first custom guitar ever to be a Floyd Rose, have fun never playing that thing because they're a bitch to work on, and you're not gonna know how to do it, and then you're gonna be upset, So like go simpler, go with what you know when it comes down to like actually being ready to buy a guitar.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, and I think there's natural like, okay, I'm stepping out of my comfort zone to do this. Like, you brought up Floyd Rose. Like I bought my first Floyd Rose guitar for the band that I'm currently in last year, and I'm still kind of like getting in the mix of like, understanding it and being able to do everything myself. But when you're dropping, they're a nightmare. And you know, when you're dropping like $3,000 off of that and you're like, let's do bare knuckles, let's get all the fixins, like you should just like think of anything you do on a musical basis as like a gradual incline trying to be zero to hero.
Yeah. And when you find something you like I'm all about like I said, experimenting on things. But if you know something that you like, do that. Like all 4 of my touring guitars, the exact same woods, like walnut body, maple top, ebony fretboard. Like I know that's what works. And they're 3 out of 4 of them have the same pickups. There's one oddball, but like once you know it works, trust yourself too. You know, like you don't have to go outrageous just because you can, you know.
Right, totally. Yeah, and I think the very first thing that I really, really like about what you said is just like, if you're like, it doesn't even matter if your band is signed or you're touring multiple months out of the year, like being able to own a piece of gear that like you kind of do that double take when you kind of look back at it, like I think that's really, really sick. And whether that's a guitar, a really bougie like kind of delay pedal, like an amp, anything that you're like, yeah, like I'm into music and like this is, you know, my pride and joy. I think that is something that every musician, you know, regardless of their seriousness of doing that on a full-time, part-time, or, you know, any time of time basis is sick. I think that's a great sentiment there.
Yeah, it should always inspire you. Like in reality, it's all just a tool for whatever art you're trying to create. And if it frustrates you more than it inspires you, get rid of it. You know?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, let's start to wrap up the show here because I know we got a hard time out. I really appreciate you coming on, Tom. One of the last things that we hit on for this podcast is a favorite mosh story that you would like to share. So that's like anything that's first to your head. That could be ACACIA strain related. That could be related to just a show that you were at, you weren't playing. Whatever's first to your mind is how we start to end the show here.
I'll give you 2 quick ones. One is my personal experience. One is very recent ACACIA strain.
Okay.
My personal one, I went and saw Lifeless at a VFW in New Jersey.
Very sick band.
Yes, fucking one of the heaviest, might be the heaviest band I've ever seen, like heaviest hardcore band I've ever seen. For whatever reason, this dude was just like out to get me, it seemed. And like, I'm not a mosh guy. Like nowadays I'm stand as far fucking away as I can and just chill. I was like 22 at this point, so I was at least like in the mix of everybody. This dude at one point like took his shoe off and threw it as hard as he could at me, and I like ducked down and missed it, and then he cartwheeled into me and just like kicked at my kneecaps. Luckily,
so wait, he cartwheeled with one shoe on?
Yeah. Actually, no. Wait, what happened? It was 2 separate little moments, so I might be blurring them together. I think he might have gotten the shoe and then went back to moshing, and then another song later, he cartwheeled into me.
I like the visual of him cartwheeling with one shoe and then a stinky sock on the other one.
We can go with that. That's a better story.
Let's go with that.
Let's go with that. Yeah. So he's one-shoed, kicking me in the kneecaps. Luckily, like I was able to finagle my way up against this wall and out of the way. But like for a good couple years, like my knee was slightly fucked up feeling. Like there was no, like I didn't have to go to the hospital. Like there was nothing seemingly wrong other than it just like feeling weird, but it took until like a couple years ago to not feel that way. And then newest weird mosh story, it was hilarious, but it was definitely odd. When we were in Philly a couple of weeks ago on this last tour, and it's on the Hate 5-6 video if anybody watches it.
Okay.
We're playing Crippling Poison, and this dude like jumped up. We thought he was gonna like stage dive. He's like kind of 2-stepping for a minute. And then he just gets down and does the worm like on stage. And we all were like, what the fuck is happening? And I was like, at one moment, I was like, I think I hate this. And then the other moment, I was like, I think I might love this more than anything that's ever happened at a show. So I don't know what I feel, but this is crazy right now.
Yeah. Shout out to anyone who can do 2-stepping into the worm. You know,
it was
not
impressive.
Like the stop and then lay down. It's like, if you can do it seamlessly, props to you.
Very
do it in the
impressive
pit, do it on the stage, whatever floats your boat.
Yeah.
But dude, this has been such a fun chat. All the, your links for yourself, for Acacia Strain, for TW Smith Guitars, all of that good stuff will be in the description and in the show notes. But if you want to plug anyone, shout out, or end the show on any certain words, the floor is yours.
I would just say go at least look at TW Smith Guitars on Instagram. Even if you don't buy it, go just look at them and tell your friends. And then listen to Slayer. That's probably the last thing I would ever end anything on.
Slayer.
There you go. You don't have to listen to my band. Listen to Slayer instead. Yeah.
You're definitely the first person to ever just shout out Slayer at the end of the episode.
They're my favorite band of all time, so I will always ride for them.
I love that. Tom, I appreciate you coming on and working through some of the technical things of this episode. But I'm really excited for the new year. And I'm sure whatever's coming down the pipe eventually for the Acacia Strain will be sick. And thanks again for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for having me, man. I appreciate it.